Wanted for murder in 3 states. Clyde Champion Barrow, age 25, 5 feet 7 inches, 130 pounds, hair dark brown and wavy, eyes hazel, light complexion. Bonnie Parker, companion of Clyde Barrow, 4 feet 10 inches tall, 85 pounds, hair dyed red. This pair is dangerous, and their car is known to be an arsenal on wheels. She reads romance and movie magazines and writes poetry. He fancies himself a musician, plays the saxophone. Entertainment history will record that in the closing months of 1967, a motion picture rose to inordinate and frightening importance on the American and international scene. The film was based on the exploits of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, America's most wanted criminals in 1934, and of Captain Frank Hamer, the Texas Ranger who tracked the pair down and put an end to their bloody careers. Because of the film's instant and spontaneous global influence on young people, their behavior, their dress, their hairstyles, their language, even on the film medium itself, the motion picture has raised certain sobering questions. Was this film and others like it just another transitory fad for audiences that need to be shocked to feel any kind of emotion? When viewers in Tokyo, London, and New York City applaud and cheer at the death of law enforcement officers on the screen, is it just more fuel for the violence that grips our cities? The document you are about to see will be as factual as 3 decades of research can make it. We will examine the crimes, the criminals, and the man who put an end to their brutal killing. We are searching for answers to these questions. Is the cult of Bonnie and Clyde cause or effect, or both? Is it escapism or a sedative? Is it myth or madness?
And I'm interested in Captain Frank Hamer. I was wondering if there is any way to get in touch with Mrs. Hamer. I saw the movie Bonnie and Clyde. I must admit it was very good acting. Saturday, the 2nd of March, Mother took me down to the Star-Telegram, and I saw the pictures of the real Bonnie and Clyde and read about all their cronies. When I saw the movie and the part where Captain Hamer spit on Bonnie, I felt I hated him. But when I read about all the people they killed and in cold blood, I felt differently towards Captain Hamer. My friends think the captain was so cold-hearted to kill Bonnie and Clyde because they were so much in love. I tell you, if Captain Hamer were alive, I would congratulate him on his actions. And since he is not, I must congratulate his wife instead.
Clyde Barrow was an absolute paranoid. And Bonnie Parker, if anything, was worse. They reveled in their killing. Clyde would, some of our interviews showed, if he saw someone walking down the street that even with his back turned, that looked suspicious, he'd grab for his gun and say, "That man's after me." If you can say that human beings can be animals, they were as close as you can come to it. The mythology that is grown up about them, I'm sure, can never be squelched, but the truth of the matter is that they didn't deserve it.
I saw the picture just so that I could know what it was about, and they just glorified crime and everything that they had done, made the young people think that it was just right to kill, that it was just all right. But they were real bandits, and they would kill you just with the blinking of an eye without even thinking. They were just terrible characters, both of them were.
And this delicate little thing here belonged to Bonnie Parker. It was tailored for Bonnie Parker. It was designed for her. Short-stop, easy to handle in a car, flip around in a hurry, out the window this way or this way. It's 20 gauge, semi-automatic Remington shotgun. There's not any question of what this gun here has killed some people, because the morning they killed the 2 highway patrolmen at Grapevine, the first shots were fired with this gun. And this was in her lap the morning they were killed in Louisiana. As a matter of fact, when the officers raised up and told them to throw up their hands, were peace officers, this gun came up over the windowsill, and that's what triggered the shooting.
In 1934, this was called a farm to Market Road. It's in Louisiana, near the little town of Gippsland. This area has changed little in 30-odd years. The taller pines were cut, but others have thrust their branches up to replace them. Here ended the last mile for public enemies Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. There had been many deadly detours before this spring morning. Joplin, Texarkana, Logansport, Wichita Falls, cold-blooded murder in Grapevine, Hillsboro, Atoka, Oklahoma, bank robberies leaving behind murdered and maimed witnesses. For Captain Hamer, one of the nation's most famous lawmen, it meant the end of months of dogged tracking. Contrary to consequent newspaper and dramatized accounts, Hamer never saw Clyde or Bonnie until the moment he demanded their surrender.
And this gun belonged to my father. He had it, or ordered it special. It isn't a specially built gun because they made these guns for law enforcement officers at the Peace Officer Equipment Company in St. Joseph, Missouri. The only difference in this and a standard 35 Remington is that this 20-shot clip, they took off the old 5-shot clip, put on the 20-shot clip for law enforcement officers, because if they were engaged in a long pursuit in automobile, it was difficult to change clips and etc. So they equipped this gun with a 20-shot clip. And he got this gun for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was when he got on the trail of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker.
Nobody knew them better. Relentless, methodical, he searched their deserted hideouts for every fragment of information, better to know their habits. No clue was too small for his study. He talked with anyone who had seen or had spoken to them. He knew their brands of whiskey and cigarettes. From their camps and target practice, he knew their guns and their ability to use them. Like the Barrow gang, he drove a Ford V8, and like Clyde and Bonnie, lived in the car most of the time. I wanted to know what they were thinking.
He began by doing detective work. He knew that in order to catch criminals as elusive and as cold-blooded as Bonnie and Clyde, that he had to learn just what they were made up of.
Well, naturally, I was just worried to death about him all the time, but I knew he was going to do it because that was his life and what he had, he just was hired to do that. And I was scared to death about him, but he always said he'd be all right. There wasn't anything happen to him. He'd be all right for me not to worry. But that's just useless to say things like that, because a wife does worry if she cares anything about her husband.
What was the climate of the times that spawned Clyde and Bonnie? America in the early 30s was a hungry America. The stock market crash of 1929 had left millions stunned and jobless. Prolonged drought worked its havoc. And in an attempt to produce more grain for bread, the plows that broke the plain left a bowl of dust hundreds of miles wide. A depressed economy closed banks, sent many to bread lines, others to government-sponsored work projects.
This was a bad times for the United States. They were in the middle of the Depression. There were lots of poor folks, lots of uneducated people that had to work, and instead of getting the education, and it was a time when law officers were well, in our time they called them the fuzz, and in those days they called them the laws. Just like we've got our people who disrespect the law, there were a lot of people back in those times who did also. But they weren't like Bonnie and Clyde.
To begin with, you know, they expected something for nothing, and we can't get anywhere with that in life. You know, we've got to work for what we get or inherit what we get some way or another. And they tried to steal, and that's a principle, of course, that honesty we try to instill in all young people, you know, pays off. And to the value of a human life is important. And to them, a life didn't mean anything. They had just seen kill as to talk to you. Honor comes first, you know. If you're hungry, most people will help you, as they did here. I was working for the public here, and there were many people that were helped, that they didn't rob banks and they didn't cheat and do things of that kind.
With the Depression in full swing and Prohibition just behind, the United States was having its worst crime wave. It was an era of notorious individual criminals in the United States: Capone, Pretty Boy Floyd, Machine Gun Kelly, John Dillinger, and Clyde and Bonnie. Clyde Champion Barrow was born March 24th, 1909 at Tellico, Texas, the son of an impoverished sharecropper trying to feed 8 children on field hand wages. He went to school off and on, through 5 grades, then quit to join a gang of car thieves and small-time robbers. Bonnie Parker was born in Rowena, Texas on October 1st, 1910. She was an A student, finished high school. She met Clyde in January of 1930, and they fell in love instantly. A friend of the two lovers described them thusly: he was a little man. What he liked about Bonnie was that her Lilliputian dimensions made Barrow, to himself, seem big and strong. For Bonnie Parker was a mite of a thing, 4 feet 10 inches tall, 85 pounds light, and with a tattoo on the inside of her thigh, commemorating her marriage to a man serving a life sentence in prison. She had a hard, angular little face and looked older than her years. She read magazines of romantic confessions, painted her toenails pink, and upset color-conscious people by trying to match her dyed red hair with red hats, dresses, and shoes. It was said she had a loud mouth, unquote. A month after meeting Bonnie, Clyde was jailed for one of his numerous petty crimes, and 1 month after that, Bonnie smuggled a pistol into his cell so that he was able to break out of jail. He was captured a few days later and sent to the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Clyde stayed in prison for nearly 2 years. The hard labor of the field gang that left the walls daily to toil in the river bottoms didn't set well with the frustrated Clyde. In a moment of despondency, he asked another convict to chop off 2 of his toes with an axe so that he would be taken within the walls and released from drudgery in the fields. Then, irony of ironies, this revolting incident had just occurred when Clyde's pardon was obtained February 2nd, 1932. He returned to Bonnie on crutches. This date is significant, for now the violent deeds of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker escalated at a furious pace, from robbing grocery stores, filling stations, and the small banks to wanton and sadistic murder. Clyde's first nationally publicized crime was committed without Bonnie. Bonnie was in jail in Kaufman, Texas, having been caught in a robbery, while Clyde had managed to get away. However, there was a female with Clyde that spring evening.
Now this'll be easy money. You stay in the car and cover me.
Hey, open up, old man.
The caller persuaded the elderly grocer to come downstairs and open his front door.
Give us some gas.
And your money.
Mrs. Boucher fainted at the death of her husband, and when she revived, the widow identified Clyde Barrow's picture. August 5th, 1932, Atoka, Oklahoma. Bonnie has been released from the jail and rejoins Clyde. But there is a third member of the gang waiting, Raymond Hamilton, notorious in his own right. Hamilton was one of the succession of men who would, for a time, be a friend to both Bonnie and Clyde, completing the strange and interpersonal triangle called the Barrow Gang. The odd threesome argued constantly, and at a dance in Atoka, Oklahoma, a sheriff and his deputy interrupted one of their quarrels and paid with their lives for their interference. Shortly after this incident, Raymond Hamilton is caught and goes to jail. To escape capture, Clyde and Bonnie travel north and rent a small stone bungalow in South Joplin, Missouri. Here they are joined by Clyde's brother Buck and his wife Blanche. Buck has only recently been released from prison, and as Blanche was to later claim, they had come to Joplin to try and persuade Clyde and Bonnie to settle down. But an all too familiar pattern was to repeat itself. With Clyde Barrow at the wheel, as usual, a fast and good driver, the bandits' car sped down the road toward the wilds of Oklahoma. With their usual good luck, Bonnie and Clyde, Buck and Blanche, had gotten away, leaving death and sorrow behind them. The place was searched. A newspaperman found and developed a roll of film. The pictures, because of their sensational poses, were published throughout the nation, and thousands of copies were circulated and helped greatly in identifying Clyde and Bonnie. Bonnie was labeled as Clyde's cigar-smoking Moll. The madness continued July 1933. Clyde and Bonnie, Buck and his wife Blanche, are holed up in a motel in Platte City, Missouri. They arouse suspicion, and police surround the motel. fugitives escape, but Buck is mortally wounded. Several days later, police catch up with him and capture Buck and Blanche. In this remarkable photograph, Buck is dying while his wife, painfully aware that this is the end, is restrained by peace officers. As this picture was being snapped, Bonnie and Clyde were about 200 yards away, escaping through the woods.
What actually got Frank Hamer on the Barra Parker case was when Clyde and Bonnie raided the prison for him at Huntsville, and 4 or 5 prisoners were allowed to escape as a result of their raid.
During most of this time, Clyde's running mate, Raymond Hamilton, was serving a life sentence at Easton State Farm near Huntsville for murder. Even though Hamilton and Barrow had many fistfights over Bonnie, Clyde and Bonnie planned to help him escape. On the morning of January 16, 1934, guards led the prisoners out into the cotton fields along the Trinity River Valley. One of the convicts slipped unnoticed behind a log where he picked up a .45 caliber pistol. Raymond Hamilton, Henry Methvin, Joe Palmer, H.B. Bybee, and another prisoner backed away from the guards. From the highway nearby, Clyde and Bonnie roared toward them. In a barrage of nearly 100 shots, one of the guards was killed. 5 prisoners escaped. Lee Simmons, head of the Texas prison system, was enraged over the brutal killings and escape of the prisoners. He wrote about it in his book, Assignment Huntsville. I lay awake nights until I had worked out a plan to bring the Clyde Barrow gang to justice. I needed an experienced and dependable man to put on the trail of Clyde and Bonnie and stay on it until they were either captured or put out of business. My decision was for Frank Hamer. If all the criminals in Texas in 1934 were asked to name the man they would most dread to have on their trail, they would all have named Captain Frank Hamer. There was not an outlaw of the period that did not fear and respect him.
It got to where in the 1915 to 1925 era that when there was a riot or trouble, all he had to do was just walk up to the trouble and introduce himself. I'm Frank Hamer. And that was generally the end of the riot and the end of the trouble.
Frank Hamer was born March 17, 1884. Although there were many successive homes during his childhood, the longest and fondest tenure was in Oxford, Texas, near the Llano River, working as a cowboy and in his own blacksmith shop. And it was here, he said in later years, I got my Oxford education. I, Francis Augustus Hamer, by occupation a cowboy, do hereby acknowledge to have voluntarily enlisted this day, 21st of April, 1906, as a private in the Ranger Force of the state. If Hamer's beginnings with the force in this barren, sun-drenched town were inauspicious, the peace and quiet were short-lived. In the next 2 decades, Frank Hamer tangled with wire cutters, horse and cattle thieves, bank robbers. He was called to every corner of the Lone Star State, but it was in the West that his star would ascend. The briefest history of what is known as the bandit troubles in Texas and Frank Hamer's involvement in this decade of turbulence can be found in Walter Prescott Webb's The Texas Rangers. I quote, in 10 years, there were 11 presidents of Mexico, all of whom succeeded through revolution and some through murder. In one period of 4 years, 1911 to 1915, Mexico had 9 presidents. One of them served 28 minutes. Naturally, the repercussions were felt along the Texas border. Add to this a world war in which Mexico was reputed to be pro-German, and then Prohibition. These 3 factors, Mexican revolutions, World War, and Prohibition, kept the Texas border in a constant uproar from 1912 to 1920. The Rangers already had their hands full with smugglers, but never until Prohibition was smuggling so profitable or so easily engaged in by those of limited means. After special duty with the United States Prohibition Service, Frank Hamer was promoted to captain. Then, in rapid succession, transferred to Austin as captain of Headquarters Company. His reputation grew as he led his men in cleaning up the oil towns of Mejia, Ranger, and Borger. Known to have participated in nearly 100 individual gunfights, to have killed 53 men defending himself and others in the line of duty, wounded 17 times, and left for dead on 4 occasions. He was the best, most fearless, and most efficient peace officer Texas ever had. And to J. Edgar Hoover, he was one of the greatest law officers in American history, unquote. This was the man the head of the Texas prison system would ask to capture Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker.
The blatant midday raid on a prison and the gunning down of the guards infuriated Lee Simmons, who was head of the penitentiary system in Texas. He went to Hamer, and Hamer agreed to get on the case at a great personal sacrifice to himself.
Well, it was a personal sacrifice for Captain Hamer to take this job, but he has been an officer all of his ever since he'd been old enough to, and he felt like he owed it to his country to rid the state of Texas and, well, might say the United States of criminals like Bonnie and Clyde. And he had fought criminals all of his life, and he knew that they were murderers.
Easter Sunday, 1934. Hamer has been on the trail of Bonnie and Clyde for 50 days and nights. And then another incident, all too familiar to Hamer, enrages a nation. It is aroused and impatient with so many cold-blooded murders. An elderly farmer, William Schieffer, recovering from a fine Easter dinner, examines his flower beds. The cars drive by in front of his farm, which lies along the highway between the city of Dallas and the town of Grapevine.
Look, his head bounced like a rubber ball.
Fingerprints found on the bottles were those of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. Recalling Bonnie's slaying of the officers in cold blood, Frank Hamer remarked, "She was, begging your pardon, a bit of a female dog." unquote.
The dozen proven murders, there must have been 2 or 3 times that many that they actually killed, but 80% were law officers, and some of the others were killed as bystanders when they were actually after law officers. It wasn't a disrespect for the law, it was an absolute psychotic hatred of the law that these 2 people had.
April 6th, Miami, Oklahoma. Bonnie and Clyde, accompanied by Henry Methvin, get stuck in the mud near Miami, Oklahoma. Cal Campbell, a constable, and Deputy Boyd stopped to assist them.
Well, you folks seem to be needing some help.
We don't need any help from the law. Go!
The wounded man was taken on a wild 14-hour ride before being released.
Well, it's been so long ago.
In 1934,
What happened?
Sophia
I was
Cook
sitting out in the
of Ruston,
swing.
Louisiana, and an acquaintance
House
were taken
down.
for a ride they'll never forget.
And waiting to go back to work. And then in a few minutes, Mr. Darby, a man who was boarding there, came out to the front and said that someone had stolen his car, and he wanted to borrow my car to go catch him. We followed him, and finally we decided that we had to get back to Ruston and go to work. So we turned around, and just as we were fixing to come back to Ruston, this car came going very fast and flagged us, and this man got out, who later proved to be Clyde Barrow, grabbed Mr. Darby by the arm, and he had a pistol. When Clyde got out of the car, he had a pistol in his hand, and he came over to Mr. Darby and hit him at the back of his head, and he almost was out completely. And then Bonnie grabbed me, and I just kept sitting in the car, and finally Mr. Darby said, Miss Stone, you better get out of the car. You better get out. Kept telling me that, and so finally it dawned on me that I had better get out of the car. So I got out, and they piled us all in their car, on the front seat. She wanted to know if Mr. Darby was my husband, and I told her emphatically no, that we were just friends. And she said, well, get in his lap. All 4 of you get on the front seat. Of course, we were just really frightened to death, both of us. I'm sure he was. I know that I was, because she had a pistol in her hand and kept it in my side the whole time that we were with them. And she wanted to know what business that we were in, what I did, and I told her that I was home demonstration agent and that I had been preserving some food over at the high school. And she said, oh, how hungry I am. I wish that I had some of that. And I laughingly told her she'd just take me back to Ruston. I'd give her all the food that she wanted. And though when we first got in the car, the conversation wasn't too friendly. Of course, I was begging to save our life, and I really believe that that is what saved our life, because she said later on in the day that if they hadn't taken a liking to us, that they would have killed us. And when we first got in, they were so mad because we were so close to their stolen car, and they had intended to rob the Ruston State Bank that day, and that was going to be the getaway car. So we upset their plans, and she said that that they were going to kill us both, and said that they were going to tie us, since we weren't man and wife, they were going to tie me to one tree and tie him to another tree, and that they would blow my brains out, and Clyde would blow Mr. Darby's brains out, that they were just going to get rid of us right away, because anybody ought to have had better sense than to follow a car like that. I think one of the things that might be interesting was that when she asked Mr. Darby what he did, he told her that he was an undertaker. And Bonnie laughingly said, well, we know one of these days that we'll get it. and said, but we'll have one last request, and we'll request that you embalm our body. She said, now, won't you get a big kick out of that? And she gave a ha, ha, ha. And later, as it happened, we both were over there to identify the bodies, and I don't know that Mr. Darby really helped with the embalming, but he was there. He had his finger in the pie enough to know that he was there anyway.
Now, in Kodak snapshots left in the hideouts or sent to the papers by the show-off bandits themselves, Bonnie is seen more and more being lifted or carried by Clyde. He would carry her to the car from their coffee stops along the highways. Bonnie, her stamina drained from running, turned to whiskey for strength to go on. From letters to relatives, we learned they knew the end was near. Clyde vowed he would never be taken alive. There are many conflicting versions of the last hours of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. We tell it now in the words of the one man to tell it the way it was, Captain Frank Hamer. The trail always led back to Louisiana. Barrow was hot in Texas and Missouri. He had killed no one in Louisiana. I had valuable sources of information, which every successful officer must have. All criminals who work in groups must have some way of communicating with one another when they get separated. I learned that Clyde had his post office on a side road about 8 miles from Gippsland, Louisiana. The point selected was on a small hill from which Bonnie, in the car, would command a view of the road while Clyde went into the piney woods for his mail. As the net closed, I requested a companion, a friend, who had served with me for many years. So, by the night of May 22, we had good reason to believe that Clyde and Bonnie would visit their mailbox within a short time. I had made contact with Sheriff Henderson Jordan and his deputy Oakley in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton from the Sheriff's Department of Dallas were members of a party that would take Barrow and the woman. About midnight, we drove out of Gippsland, hid our cars in the piney woods, and made arrangements to finally capture the bandits. We constructed a blind from pine branches within about 25 feet of the point where the car would stop. The men were spaced at intervals of about 10 feet parallel to the road. We were to take Barrow and the woman alive if we could. With everything ready, we had nothing to do but wait about 7 hours without breakfast or coffee. Waiting is the hardest thing an officer has to do.
He told his men that morning when they were out there in the woods awaiting that they would be back in a little while if everything went right. And he said, now if any of you men, said there might be some of us that'll bite the dust, but said if any of you men want to back out, now's the time to do it. And I'll think nothing about it. Said, I won't think less of you. That's what he said. And said he knew that Manny Galt wouldn't back out. He knew that Manny would stay by him through thick and thin, you know. But he wanted to give them all a chance, and said every one of them to the man stayed, so they wouldn't think about leaving.
As daylight came, a few cars passed, and occasionally a logger's truck. It was about 10 minutes after 9 when we heard a humming through the pines that was different from that made by the other motors. A car was coming from the north at high speed, singing like a sewing machine. We heard it when it must have been 3 miles away. When Barrow brought the car to a standstill, he pressed the clutch and slipped into low gear with the engine still idling. And just as we had figured, both he and the woman peered with all their attention toward the stump. I stepped from the bushes and commanded Barrow to surrender. Instead of obeying the order as I had hoped and prayed, they grabbed for their weapons, and all hope for a capture alive perished.
Somewhere along the line, something went wrong in their minds, of course, that made them such outlaws and made them have such a feeling toward the law, because they wanted something for nothing, and that they knew that the officers stood for what was right.
Clyde Barrow was absolute paranoid, and Bonnie was, if anything, worse.
But she told me if I dared move, or if I got out of that car, she'd shoot me in the back and kill me, and for me to stay put.
But when I read about all the people they killed and in cold blood, I felt different towards Captain Hamer.
But that shows his hate just immediately. It didn't matter whether they were after us or what, that they were just officers of the law standing for what was right, and that they were going to just mow them down regardless whether they had done anything or not. Now, those officers weren't doing a thing but doing the duty and looking for us, but they were going to kill them if they had turned around. They were going to just shoot them. He said, we're not going to wait for anything. If they come back, we're just going to kill the officers. And that showed their thinking. It was so warped.
Examination proved the car was an arsenal. Thus, on May the 23rd, 1934, the news was flashed over the wires that the killers, Bonnie and Clyde, had come to the end of their trail in the piney woods of Louisiana. A wrecker came and towed the bullet-ridden vehicle to Arcadia, where thousands came to view the death car. Harassed officers, busy undertakers, thriving restaurant owners, and people everywhere breathing a sigh of relief at the finish of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. Coroner J.L. Wade asked Frank Hamer if he was quite sure that the slain couple was Barrow and Parker. Pull off his left shoe and you'll find his big toe is cut off. He has a tattoo with the initials EBW on his left arm, and on the right arm is a figure of a girl and the name Grace tattooed there. If you look at her right thigh, you'll find a tattoo, a double heart with an arrow stuck through, and the name Bonnie tattooed in one heart and the name Roy in the other, just above her right knee. Just before sunset on May the 25th, 1934, Clyde Barrow was buried on a chalky West Dallas hillside near his boyhood home. Although Bonnie had indicated in one of her poems that she wanted to be buried beside Clyde, her mother refused. She was buried in a steel casket the next day, alone, at the West Dallas Fish Trap Cemetery. The quartet sang Beautiful Isle of Somewhere. Bonnie's mother chose the poem, written by Bonnie, that would mark her grave. The flowers are all made sweeter by the sunshine and the dew. So this old world is made brighter by the lives of folks like you. Unquote. Thousands of letters and telegrams poured in praising Frank Hamer. He was applauded by the press and honored on the floor of Congress. Special resolution was passed, and the Texas legislature passed a similar tribute. One man sent a telegram which simply said, "I feel a damn sight safer driving around at night now, thanks to you."
Captain Hamer had actually retired from public service when he was asked to go on the Bonnie and Clyde case. He first became a ranger in 1906. He was, even at the time of 1915 to 1925, people considered him the greatest Texas Ranger that had ever lived. J. Edgar Hoover later said he was one of the greatest lawmen in American history. Walter Webb said he was the most fearless man in the American West. There are letters from 5 or 6 Texas governors that call him the greatest law enforcement officer that Texas and the Southwest has ever known.
And there was another kind of letter. Although the stolen guns and ammunition from the car were awarded to Hamer by the authorities, both families tried to get the weapons back, since they could now be sold for a great deal of money to collectors. I am writing you again, as we have never got no answer from the other letter we wrote you. We have been told here by Sheriff Smoot Schmidt that you have in your possession some guns that were in the car at the time you and other officers killed my boy Clyde.
And this gun is a Browning automatic rifle, BAR. I guess every ex-GI in America knows what this is. This was in the car with Clyde and Bonnie, along with another one just like it. They stole this gun from the National Guard Army in Beaumont, Texas. It's a pretty powerful weapon, and I'm sure they used it with some telling effect up at Joplin, Missouri, because the Missouri police up there had an armored car that was dismantled with the gun, and I'm sure it was one of these. No one has ever seen a picture, found a record, or any officer who survived a gunfight with them has ever testified they had a Thompson or the so-called Tommy gun or submachine gun. They never had one. But they did have these weapons here, which can be fired full automatic. But I think the sergeant of the Missouri State Patrol by the name of Kaler said that he was standing behind a pecan tree quite large. He told my father when he was on the case, and said, I thought I was pretty safe. But he said, that little red-headed woman filled my face full of splinters on the other side of that tree with one of those guns, and I'm sure that's what she was using. Now this is a horse of another color. This is a 10-gauge Winchester lever-action shotgun. You don't see too many lever-action shotguns. You don't see too many 10-gauge shotguns. This gun belonged to Clyde Barrow. And this gun was in the car with him the morning he was killed over in Louisiana in 1934. Now I would suspect that probably he used this gun in some of the fights he had with peace officers, getting away from them, probably when they had them in close quarters up in Joplin, Missouri, and other places. Of course, he had it quite a long time. This gun was in the car the morning they were killed in Louisiana. This splotch on the receiver of this gun is the last blood that Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker ever spilled. It's their own.
When it comes to writing about Bonnie and Clyde, it seems that every writer uses a different set of facts, or particularly motion picture writers prefer to work with no facts at all. This makes it very difficult to get at the truth about Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Now here today in the studio, we have set up a rather unique method of getting at the truth about this pair. What you see here is a lie detector, commonly called, or preferably called, a polygraph. This man is Floyd Hamilton. And we're going to give Floyd a lie detector test and ask him some of the most controversial questions about Bonnie and Clyde. But first, I'd like to establish Mr. Hamilton's association with Bonnie and Clyde, with the Barrow Gang. Floyd, you were released from prison when?
July the 2nd, 1958.
1958. And how long were you in prison?
Approximately 20 years.
20 years. What prisons were these?
Leavenworth, Alcatraz, and Texas.
How many years did you spend in Alcatraz?
12 years and about 70, 80 days.
And what was this for?
Bank robbery and transporting stolen cars across state line.
What state lines were involved?
Well, several state lines. See, they're all cases were transferred to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and there where I was tried.
Mm-hmm. So in 1938, you went to prison. At that time, prior to that time, you were the #1 most wanted criminal in the United States. Is that true?
So I was classified by the federal FBI as public enemy #1.
It's true that you were also the brother of Raymond Hamilton. Is
Yes,
that right?
That's right.
What happened to Raymond?
Raymond was executed by the state in 1935.
1935?
Yes.
And what was this for?
On escape, when Clyde and Bonnie liberated from East Ham prison, an officer was killed.
An officer was killed?
Yes.
And Raymond was tried for this?
He wasn't tried for the murder. He was tried for being a principal in the planning of the break.
And he was found guilty and
Yes.
executed. Now, Raymond was often, or several times during his career, was a member of the Barrow Gang. Is that right?
Yes.
In fact, when he was a youngster, he was a friend of Clyde Barrow's. Is
Yes.
that right, a teenager? And I believe you said you knew Bonnie when she was still in grade school.
Yes.
When was that?
Well, I moved to Dallas in 1920, and I went to school, Cement City School, where she attended, and during the part of 1921 and 22.
This was before you quit school.
Yes.
And you lived in what was then called West Dallas, is that right?
Well, it wasn't part of the city then, it was county, but it's what is called West Dallas now.
Describe West Dallas to me.
Well, it's more or less a poor district, slum district.
And this was during the Depression, is
Yes,
that right?
and during that time there was approximately 5,000 people lived out there, but now I think it's about 30 or 40.
And this was the home of both Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow.
Yes. See, Clyde and Bonnie, including myself, moved to Dallas during the 20s, and we all moved in West Dallas.
Now, when did you know that your brother Raymond and Clyde were engaged in criminal activities?
In 1932.
In 1932. Clyde had already been in prison prior to that time.
Yes, he was on well, I suppose he served 2 years in prison on a 14-year sentence. So he had approximately 12-year parole.
You saw your brother and Clyde and Bonnie quite often, is that right?
Yes.
And during 1932 to 1934, when Clyde and Bonnie were desperados, you had contact with them.
Yes.
Continuously.
Very often. Not continuously, but
continually.
sometime there'd be a week or two or a month in between meets.
Where would you meet them?
On country roads surrounding Dallas.
What was your purpose in meeting them there?
Well, mostly to take Miss Parker, Miss Barrow, and my mother out to meet them, to visit with them.
Did you take them food or money? Or?
Oh, yes. I took them food and also drained gasoline out of my car and put in their tank.
You mean Clyde was not a very successful bank robber or robber?
No, I wouldn't say he was.
They were often without money?
Yes.
Now tell us about Bonnie. Was she an integral part of the gang?
Well, she was a continuous part of it because Clyde and Bonnie and Ray all began their crime career together.
Were Clyde and Bonnie sweethearts?
Yes.
They were. Did she participate in the robberies and the killings?
Only by being present.
She, as far as you know, did she ever kill anyone?
No.
She did not?
No.
Did they tell you about their robberies and their killings when you met them on these country roads?
Well, after each crime was committed, gun battle or what you might call it, run-in with the law, well, we would question them and they would tell us their side of the story.
And no one ever said to you that Bonnie participated in the shooting or that she ever killed anyone?
No, never did.
All right, now, there was rather a tragic automobile wreck in which Bonnie was severely injured. Could you tell us about that?
Well, I can give you their version of it.
All right.
They were running at a high rate of speed up in the panhandle of Texas and one night, and a bridge was washed out, no lights, and they run off into the riverbed or creek bed or whatever it was there, and the car turned upside down on them and caught a fire and trapped Bonnie under the car, and farmers living nearby come out and turned the car over and got Bonnie out, but she was burned very badly on one leg.
Is that all? One leg was burned,
Yes.
or other parts of her body, just the leg?
Mostly one leg.
Her right leg, was that right?
Well, I don't
You
remember.
recall. Did you ever see her leg while it was still burned?
No, I didn't see it was burned, but directly before it was healed up real good, yes.
Did they go to a doctor? Did they have access
No.
to a doctor? What did they do?
They went to Missouri and rented a apartment, or a garage apartment, and
Was that when Buck and Blanche came up to stay with them?
Buck was released from prison. He bought an old Mormon automobile, and he and Blanche went to Missouri to front for him.
This is Buck Barrow, the brother
Yes.
of Clyde, right?
Clyde's brother.
And they shot themselves out of a trap there in Missouri, didn't they?
Yes, the
A few days later?
officers came out to investigate. Now, these officers testified at my harboring charge in 1935. In other words, I heard both sides. I heard Clyde's side and the officer's side of the story. And it was similar. That they went out to investigate something suspicious that people had called, and they didn't know that it was Clyde and Bonnie. And one or two officers got killed.
Well, back to this, we'll get to that in just a minute. Back to this burn that Bonnie suffered. Did she come out of this as a cripple?
Yes, her leg would never straighten out.
And why was this?
On account of, because she laid up behind, most of the time she laid up behind the back seat on the
back
coupe.
seat?
Yes.
Or the front seat?
Well, the front
only
seat,
of
the only
coupe.
seat, it was a coupe. They usually rode in coupes at that time, and only had a wider space behind the back seat. And she would sleep up behind the back seat and lay up there, because sitting in the car, the seat would...
But her leg actually was drawn, and
It healed
she
crooked.
limped very badly,
Yes.
which made it hard for her to move around. Did Clyde have to help her in and out of buildings or in and out of the car as a result of that?
That's right.
Tell me, how did they live? Where did they sleep? Where did they eat?
They slept in cars, and they would eat out of drive-ins or country grocery stores.
Country grocery stores. How about their bathing facilities or bathrooms?
That would take baths in creeks or streams out in the countries.
And the restroom was the bushes, is
Yes,
that
that's
right?
right.
Not a very glamorous life.
No, it wasn't. I can assure you that, because I went through some of it.
All right. Now, you served 2 years in prison earlier, and what was that for? It was 1935 and 1930.
That was conspire to harbor Clyde Barrow, Bonnie Parker, and my brother Raymond.
That's when Bonnie and Clyde broke Raymond and others out of the Eastham prison. Is that right?
Yes,
How many people actually served time for harboring or having knowledge of that break?
there's either 19 or 20 of us.
And that included both of the mothers, Bonnie Parker's mother
And my
Clyde
mother.
Barrow's, and your mother, and Raymond and your brother.
Yes.
How does it feel, Floyd, to be a desperado, to know that the police have orders to shoot you down on sight?
It's the most miserable life that a man could live.
You live this life in the same way that Bonnie and Clyde did.
Yes, I've practically lived in an automobile, day and night.
Were you afraid?
Yes, I was afraid.
Why do you think that Clyde killed so many officers?
Well, that wouldn't be a simple answer to a question to answer. However, I think it was through fear in this respect, that he was afraid of being caught and linger in the death chamber house.
You think he was afraid of being executed?
Yes, being executed or killed by the police.
I think that's enough time on that right now. What we need to do is move on to this lie detector, and if you'll take off your coat now, we'll take a couple of minute break, and then we'll come back and start the lie detector test.
All right.
It's okay, just leave it. Mr. Hamilton, during the test, I want you to sit just like you're sitting now, facing straight ahead. When I ask you to, I want you to close your eyes so you can concentrate on the questions better. Please answer all of my questions with a simple no or yes. If during the test your right arm actually goes to sleep or gets uncomfortable, you let me know and I'll be glad to take the pressure off, but please do not move either hand. Close your eyes, please. I'm ready to start the test. Is your last name Hamilton?
Yes.
Were you born in 1908?
Yes.
Were you ever in school with Bonnie Parker?
Yes.
While you were in school with her, did you ever hear anyone say that Bonnie was a girl of bad virtue?
No.
Are you wearing a white shirt?
Yes.
Did you see Bonnie and Clyde almost once a month between 1932 and 1934?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did Bonnie ever kill anyone?
No.
Have you eaten today?
Yes.
Did you ever see Bonnie smoke a cigar?
No.
To your knowledge, was Clyde Barra a homosexual?
No.
To your knowledge, was Bonnie Parker a nymphomaniac?
No.
Have you answered every one of my questions with the truth?
Yes.
This chart is over with, but I want you to sit just as you are until I tell you so. Okay.
The man who conducted the polygraph test that you've just seen was Mr. William B. Burnham of Dallas, Texas. I'd like to talk with Mr. Burnham now about the results of that polygraph test. Mr. Burnham, you made this test and another test this morning, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
You, in other words, you corroborated the test that we made on camera with another test under ideal polygraph conditions.
Yes, of course, the first test, the real test will run first and then followed up with this filmed test.
This was in this studio, but just with you and Mr. Floyd Hamilton in the studio. No one else around, no lights, no camera.
That's right, only myself and him.
All right, now you've had a chance to review your findings from both those polygraph tests, and in general, what would you say?
Generally speaking, in my opinion, the test is inconclusive.
Inconclusive?
Yes. Let me go further here. The question regarding whether or not Mr. Hamilton was in school with Bonnie Parker.
Yes.
It's my opinion that he told the truth when he answered yes, that he was in school with Bonnie Parker. Also, that he answered truthfully the question, did you ever see Bonnie Parker smoke a cigar? His answer was no. I do not think he ever did see Bonnie Parker smoke a cigar. Some of the other questions, there was some response to the questions which, in my opinion, there could be two reasons for this response, either due to the lapse of time between the instances or the association with Bonnie and Clyde and the time that the test was run. He does not really recall what the situation was, or else Mr. Hamilton lied.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Burnham, you're saying that we can't be sure that Mr. Hamilton told the truth or remembered on all the answers that he gave us. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's your summary?
Yes, and that we cannot be sure. It's inconclusive.
All right. Thank you very much. Pleasure having you with us.
The Texas Rangers have discharged their duties with honor through more than a century of frontier defense and contemporary crime fighting. Yet from time to time, there are those who would dissolve this law enforcement body. Any such proposals would have been very unpopular following Frank Hamer's service to his country. And if the film you have just seen has given you a new awareness and appreciation of law enforcement, then Frank Hamer would have been pleased that you saw it.